Problem.
Right. So, as I was saying, what you actually said was that Allah inherits, like, he gives you the money, it's his money, and then he takes it back. That is a human activity. You've just described the attribute of Allah in a way that we can think or imagine, and Allah says that his attributes are not like anything we can think or imagine. So you literally contradicted your Quran.
Give me time. Give me. When I say God is not the same as human, I mean that God doesn't die. When he gives you something, he doesn't take it back because he can have it back because it's his already. He gave it to you as a loan.
Even logically, that doesn't make sense.
Why?
Because an inheritor is not the one who dies. You see, logic.
That's why I'm telling you, God is not the same.
Is Allah an inheritor? No, the point is, you see, you're not even thinking about your own argument, bro. You're not even. Listen, you've literally said Allah is not the one who dies. An inheritor is not the one who dies. An inheritor is the one who survives the one who dies. So quite literally, Allah survives our deaths, so it's right to describe him as an inheritor.
Okay. The verse says, "Inna nahnu narithu al-ard." In Arabic, we will inherit the earth. Who's the earth? Who owns the earth?
That's the contradiction.
No, wait. Answer my question.
Allah owns the earth. Allah owns the earth.
So, when everybody dies,
yes,
because all of us are gonna die, right? One day.
Yes.
The earth will become to who?
Does Allah own it?
Yes.
Do we have ownership of the earth?
Temporarily, yeah.
Okay, so are you saying Allah doesn't own the earth right now?
He does.
So do we own the earth right now?
We can own.
We have a certain title called.
So we have shared. So basically, human beings.
Can we talk, please?
So human. No. I'm just going to reply to his point. Human beings and Allah have shared ownership. That's what you've just said.
What?
No, it's not. No, there's a certain term which in Arabic is called khulafa. Khalifa is essentially it's a bit similar to the
Regency.
No, it's not entirely. It's a bit similar to the Christian principle of stewardship. This idea that you basically put on this earth to...
Or regency.
Okay, whatever. I mean, back in RE, we learned stewardship. Regency, call it what you want. But essentially, this principle is that you're on this earth and you basically have been put on earth to carry out the will of God. It doesn't mean that now there's shared ownership, that, when you look up the paper, it says God/the humans. No, the ownership is upon God.
Yeah.
We have been given this duty on earth to carry out God's will. That's basically it.
Right. So let me reply to this, because the thing is, you're jumping around on hot coals because you're trying to reconcile a contradiction that can't be reconciled. If you're saying that Allah inherits, then what you're saying is he doesn't own. If he owns it, keep running, Shamsi. Right? If he owns it, then that means he's not inheriting it. Now, if you're saying that Allah owns the earth right now, right, then that means he doesn't inherit what he already owns. You can't inherit what you already own.
See, the inheritance...
What is inheritance?
It's taking a transfer of wealth from a living person, from a dead person to a living person.
Great.
Right?
Right. Okay. Is this...
So, we're gonna die, right?
Yes.
So, whom Britain will be to whom when we die?
When all human beings are dead, Allah is the only possessor. Right.
So it's the same.
But that's inheritance. That's inheritance.
Yeah.
Exactly. But that contradicts the idea of ownership, because you don't inherit what you already own.
We are, as human beings, yes.
So let me...
As human beings, you are right.
But now you've got another problem.
No. Why?
You've got another problem.
Why?
Because the logic of your argument forces you into the position of affirming the idea of joint ownership whilst denying the idea of joint ownership, and that's another contradiction. Who owns the earth right now?
Look, you're taking this in a ridiculous spin. You're looking at it.
It's not ridiculous.
No, I'm going to tell you.
I mean, I agree. The Quran is ridiculous, but it's not my fault. The Quran says that. That's just what the Quran says.
But the point being is that you're looking at inheritance as if it's some kind of jurisprudential, lawyer kind of look. It's not, the word inheritance here, it basically refers to the idea that no one will be on earth when God will take it back. Everyone will die. we have a verse which is basically.
Do you affirm that Allah is the inheritor?
Well,
Do you affirm that Allah is the inheritor?
yes, but
What is inheritance?
But not in the
Not
human
in the-
form.
I mean,
not in the human form.
But you described it in a human way.
No, but you're
trying
trying
to
to find
explain it to you.
inheritance.
But you shouldn't.
I should, because you don't
There's basically a verse,
understand.
"Kullu shay'in halikun illa wajha," which means that everything will perish
Yes.
except God.
Yes.
So this idea of inheritance is referring to once everyone is dead, the only living being is God. This
Right.
is what it's referring to. It's not,
So-
not that this kind of a,
If everything
a joint
disappears,
ownership.
so you see that's just another contradiction. If everything disappears, what's in being inherited?
No, I'm talking about life, as in human
Are
life.
you saying
Everyone's
that?
dead.
No. But this is the point. And the inheritance is very clearly that a dead person surrenders possession to a living person. That is inheritance. Am I being unfair?
No, that is the literal juristic, like,
Thank you.
law-based.
So now
definition, but
we've
that's not
and Allah is described as the inheritor.
Yes.
But that contradicts the idea that Allah is the owner, because you can't inherit what you already possess. But it gets worse. There's other contradictions in the Quran.
See, no, but when people think that they own and they die and leave everything, then it shows that it's similar to inheritance in the sense that he takes back what he gave.
So it's similar but not the same.
Similar to the human way of doing things, but it's not the same, of course, because Allah is always living. He doesn't die.
Yeah.
So
No
it's
one's
like-
arguing that point, by the way.
So I'm giving you something. Say I'll give you my phone, and then I take it back.
Wait, let's see. Can we use the analogy of your phone as an example? You give me your phone. Do I own your phone at that point?
For a while.
Right. If I own it, do you own it?
And the time when you own it,
Yes.
I'm the owner, but I gave you the ability to use it.
I'll ask you the question again. If you give me your phone and I own it, do you still own it?
I didn't give it to you to own it. I gave it to you to use it. That's the difference.
So if you give me your phone to own it,
Not to own it,
sorry,
to use it.
to use it. If you gave me your phone to use it,
Yes.
you're still the owner, right?
Yes.
So if I die,
Yeah.
can you inherit something that you own?
I take it back.
But can you inherit it? I know you repossess it. You see, what you're doing is,
Okay.
what you lack is a word. The word that you're looking for, the word that the Quran doesn't give you, and this is why there's a contradiction, is because what you're describing is repossession. That's what you're describing.
your problem is
You're
that
describing repossession. You're not describing inheritance.
You worship a man god.
That's changing the subject.
No, it's not changing the subject, because you have this notion that when we discuss theology, you can bring humans and combine it with God in some kind of crazy way. When we're referring to this idea of inheritance, as I told you, when everyone dies, okay, the sole being that can enable to basically incur action upon earth is who? Is God, per definition. So that's what it's referring to when it says inherit. It doesn't mean that now you have this joint ownership and then you give the ownership back to God in that kind of sense. No one has understood it that way throughout the history of 1400.
No. What I'm saying is that the reality is that you haven't even begun to address the argument. Because you don't even understand the argument.
No, I understand it.
It doesn't
We have Arab atheists. No one said that.
The thing is, guys. The thing is,
because they understand Arabic.
if you're saying, and I know there's Arab atheism. I know atheism is increasing in the Islamic world. We both know that, right? It's a fact. I don't know why you bother denying it. Like, it is. Do you agree that atheism is growing in the Arab world?
It's growing everywhere.
Islam is rotting from the inside, guys.
But
Just
also-
deal with it.
but-
No, I mean,
Right? It's rotting from the inside.
Pure
So-
research.
so-
Islam is the greatest. It's the most growing religion in the world.
Absolutely, and I agree through birth rates.
No, I mean,
Yes.
no.
Go and compare.
The Philippines
Go and
has
compare.
converted.
Go and compare. I'm not denying conversions. Again, that's a fallacious argument. You're hearing arguments that aren't stated. God, peace with you, sister. Right? The point is, bro, if you go and compare what Pew Research says about child-sized families and correlate that to religious growth, you see a correlation.
I don't deny that childbirth has something to do with it.
Yeah.
But I believe Senegal and
I never said that conversions aren't happening. There are like in the church that I was at today, there was a girl from Saudi Arabia and a girl from Iran. They're both Christians. You know, and Christianity is growing exponentially in places like Indonesia and in places like Iran. It's started to grow in Saudi Arabia.
I think Iran is more atheism.
You know,
Saudi Arabia is more
yeah,
atheism.
I'm not denying atheism is growing faster. I totally agree with you. That's what all the evidence suggests.
It's just dying completely.
Yes, and you love to boast that, and Islam is rotting from the inside. I literally just gave you a bunch of examples, but
Yeah,
you weren't
Iran,
listening.
Saudi Arabia, I agree.
And in Indonesia, and in
Where?
Indonesia, and in North Sudan. North Sudan was applying Sharia law up until last year. They've abandoned Sharia law. They've abandoned Sharia law. They fought 18 years. They fought the south.
Okay, South Africa.
The south. Yeah. And Christianity is growing in Sudan.
Okay.
Yeah. So there's another example for you. Okay.
Let's go back to the
Now,
inheritance.
so my point is, you were the one that raised the Islam is the fastest growing religion thing.
Yeah,
He
but
was the
because-
one that
because you
raised
said-
about the atheists. So you invited me to make those points.
Yeah, because you mentioned that Islam was rotting. Like,
No, he said we have atheists in the Arab world.
Yeah, that's true.
So he brought up the question of atheism. That's why I mentioned it.
Fair enough.
You need to keep track of the conversation.
I mean, I just joined recently.
That's fine. But the point is, there are two assertions that mutually contradict can't both be true. If you're describing Allah as an inheritor, that excludes him as being the owner. If you describe him as being the owner, it excludes him from being the inheritor. Now, if you're saying that Allah has ownership and we also have ownership, then that means that you're asserting joint ownership. Now, you can get out of the contradiction. You can get out of the contradiction by asserting that we have joint ownership with Allah, but that would be shirk.
No, it's not. And shirk is basically when you give
The attributes of Allah
Yeah.
to someone other than Allah. So if you're saying that we have joint ownership with Allah, that's shirk.
No, that's not how shirk works. Shirk is basically when you give a soul attribute. So, for example, we are seeing.
Like ownership.
No, we are seeing. God is also seeing. So does that mean we're now committing shirk because we can see and God can see?
So I mean, that brings on to another problem with Islamic texts.
No, it's not a problem at all. It's just,
Yeah, it does.
It's just that the problem is that you're critiquing this from a Christian theological perspective because you want to, rush. Because
Yeah, I mean, no offense, but you don't even know what my criticism is about the vision of Allah, because you've never heard it.
I've seen some videos.
So I'm going to prove to you that you don't know. What is my criticism of the issue about Allah's visions and the fact that we have
Visions,
visions?
in
What,
what sense?
that like he can see. What is my criticism of that? Because you're claiming to know.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean,
Right,
we're
great.
exactly referring
Which
to.
is exactly what I said. You don't know what my criticism is of that. Yeah. So here's what my so here's what my criticism of is. It's simple. If you're saying that Allah can see,
Yeah.
but Allah's vision is not like anything that you can think or imagine, so it's not like any kind of human vision, then the word vision there isn't a word, doesn't describe anything, it's simply a sound. And that means that the Quran has sounds but not words.
Okay, that makes zero sense.
Well, it does to anyone who thinks logically.
No, that is philosophically, that is just.
Shall we work out the logic for you?
No, I mean, I'm pretty good in philosophy.
Great,
I mean,
good.
actually,
Then you
very, very
won't
good. But
struggle
that-
to follow it.
But that is no. It's not about struggling. You're just not making any sense at all.
Brilliant.
When you're saying
What
that
is the
vision-
what is the definition? How do we distinguish between words and sounds?
Well, words are defined, and sounds are not defined.
No. Give me. I mean, yes. I mean, in the broadest sense, that is correct. But be more basic. How do we make the distinguishment between words and sounds?
Well, words are derivatives of a language. Sounds are not language based.
Exactly. So one is communicating something and another one isn't. Agreed? Right. So when Allah says he has vision and you say that that's not anything like you can think or imagine, then that noise has communicated nothing. Because anything that you can think or imagine that sound to mean, it is by definition not the thing you have thought or imagined. Which means that that word communicates nothing and therefore it is just a sound.
No, I mean that's in your really simplistic.
So explain why it's wrong.
Because when so for something to actually make sense, it has to be derived within like a certain framework
Yes.
of the like subject that you're trying to express.
Yeah.
So for example,
One word is contrasted by another word.
fair enough, but like when we're discussing theology within an Islamic framework, we're discussing certain attributes that in reality are expressive of the human experience. So this idea, for example, that God sits on his throne,
Yeah.
or that God's hand is above your hand, or God sees,
Yeah.
or God speaks.
Yep.
All of this is just expressive of the human experience for us to understand the higher being.
But what do you
All it
understand?
is.
But that's
It's not,
the point.
It's not that God has eyes or God has a hand.
But listen, you've just proven my point. You've just said that these are human expressions so that we can understand. But those human expressions, if I asked you, what is Allah's hand? What is Allah's shin? What is Allah's vision? You will reply that Allah is not like anything you can think or imagine. He's not like anything in his creation, which means that nothing can be understood by these terms. They might as well all be the same term.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Right?
actually true.
Yeah.
That's perfectly true.
Yeah.
So this idea that he's all seeing,
Thank you
all knowing,
for
all
demonstrating
saying,
that my argument is
yeah.
logical.
Yeah, okay, that part makes sense. All
Great.
seeing,
We've gone from no sense to making sense.
Yeah, because in the beginning you were talking about how they were just sounds in a sense. I mean, it's a confusion. The confusion was a bit weird.
So you agree that all these words can be the same
They
word?
are synonymous. No, they are literally synonymous. Because the idea of all seeing, all hearing, all knowing, it means the same thing. I mean, there is no vision within God. There is no, there isn't a brain where all knowledge just comes. It is just expressive of the human experience.
Do you believe in divine simplicity?
No, I wouldn't say that.
Right.
Divine.
So you assert the essence and you assert the attributes.
Absolutely.
Right. If you're saying that they are all the same word, do you assert that the hand is the shin? Do you assert that the face and the hands are the same thing? Then therefore they are not the same word, and
No.
that's another contradiction. You're just compounding contradiction on top of one another. You're asserting contradictory points.
That is.
You've literally just told me 2 minutes ago, 1 minute ago, that these could be all the same word. And then in the next breath, you've said that they are not the same thing.
But the skin and the face and the hand and all of these expressions, again, it is within the same paradigm that I just explained earlier, which that
made no sense.
Huh?
That made no sense.
We just agreed that it did like a minute ago.
Go on.
Anyways, so the notion of the sin, of the shin, sorry, of the hand, of the face, etc., is also like expressive of, for example, God's power. This idea that God's hand is above all hands, God's power is above all power.
Yeah.
When God sits on the throne, it's representative of His control, etc., etc.
Yeah.
So that's the understanding of these, expressions with regards to God's like so-called physical parts.
So you haven't. Just so you know, I didn't hear anything in what you've just said that reconciles the contradiction. Nothing in what you said reconciled the contradiction.
But the others.
What was the contradiction?
The contradiction was how can the shin and the face, the hands, etc., be part of?
No, the contradiction was that the Quran says that these are the words of Allah. A word communicates sound. Sorry, a word communicates meaning, not sound. A word communicates meaning. These words don't mean anything to the extent that they could be the same word. Therefore, they're not words, they're just sounds. That was the contradiction.
Synonyms mean the same thing. That doesn't mean they don't mean anything.
But what? So, for instance, what? When you say Allah's hands, what are those?
They aren't anything.
There you go.
God isn't a thing, by the way.
Yeah. But that's
Because in the Quran it says literally, "Laysa kamithlihi shay," which means nothing, no thing is like Him.
I've been.
So that means nothing.
And that's the problem. That's the problem with that's the point of the contradiction.
No, because
That's where the rubber hits the road of the contradiction.
how is it a contradiction if God isn't a thing?
I'll say it again because you didn't listen. The contradiction is Allah says that the Quran are His words.
Yes.
A word is something that communicates meaning.
Okay.
There are words in the Quran that do not communicate any meaning such that,
Stop.
yeah,
Which words don't communicate any meaning?
hands, shin, face.
How? I told you, hands is a reference to control. Face is a reference to his identity. Sitting is a reference to him being in control.
Great. Okay. So you're not a Salafi. You don't believe in the Salafi.
I'm a Shia.
Okay. Right. Great. I don't get many opportunities to speak to a Shia, and I didn't realise I was. Can you show me where Muhammad says what you've just said?
Yes, we have a hadith collection by the name of Kitab al-Tawheed by Sheikh Saduq. He mentions that these attributes, the idea of the hand, the face, is expressive of his heart.
That Muhammad said that?
Yes.
Right, I'd like to see that, if you could pull that up.
I mean,
because that would just mean...
I don't know if it's translated, so...
It would be good. It would be good to see that, because that would mean that your version of Islam is more consistent and coherent than the Salafi version of Islam.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Salafi because I don't believe in it.
No. I'm saying if you've got a hadith that pushes that onto Muhammad, that from a textual point of view,
yeah, I mean, look,
then the question is, like, why do the Salafi reject that hadith? Why?
Because they have a different hadith corpus.
Yes.
So the sources where they get the narration from the Prophet is like a different chain.
Yes.
So we have a different chain than them.
Yeah. So just like Muslims accuse Christians of having different Bibles, Muslims have different hadiths.
That's true.
Yeah. And there's no agreement amongst Muslims about what hadiths to use.
There are hadith which are mujma' alayh, which means every Muslim agrees.
I agree. There are some that are shared. You all right, bro? Peace be with you, bro. So, like, why would...
Basically, this book called
Go on.
Kitab al-Tawheed.
Could you read it?
I mean, it's got a lot of narrations, but we can...
If you can find it, I'd love to hear it. Because all that would mean that the Shia Islam is excluded from this particular criticism, but it would lead to another criticism, which I would like to express. But I've never heard a Salafi be able to defend against this point, but I'm happy to accept that maybe a Shia can. So, now in terms of why the Salafi and the Sunni reject that hadith, what is the basis of that rejection? Is that a shared hadith, is what I'm asking?
No.
Right.
I mean,
So it's particular to Shia Islam?
No, I mean, some of the Ash'arites and the Maturidis, which are the majority of Sunnis, by
Yes.
the way,
They have a similar theology to you.
Yeah.
So are you listening, Jake? Lots of Muslims have different theologies.
No, I mean, it's not really like that because the Ash'arites and the Maturidis are the majority of the Sunni ones.
I know they are. It's just in this corner the Salafi are very present.
They're very vocal,
Yeah.
but their theology in this sense, in the idea of affirming the physical attributes to God, it's a minority within the Muslim world.
Would you agree that my criticism stands against the Salafi?
To the truth in order to deceive you better. It's not difficult to understand.
Because they can't show Muhammad saying what you're going to show me Muhammad said. And by the way, I'm being more charitable than any da'i, because the da'i in this part would say, until you show me, I don't believe it. Whereas I'm saying that you're acting in good faith, and I'm willing to accept even though you haven't shown me yet.
I mean, I have read. I mean, I can't show it because you don't know Arabic. I mean, it's in Arabic.
Right. Right.
Because I have to translate it. You have to trust me.
Yeah. And the point is, I'm going to be charitable.
Yeah, because
and I'm going to take you at your word.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
I don't read the live.
But my point is, this just moves my argument into a different phase as why, as a Christian, I reject Islam, because the Shia and the Sunni don't have any agreement about which hadiths to use to interpret the Quran, except in a small corpus. And when you look at the hadiths that they disagree about, Islam starts to look very different.
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on which part of theology you're talking about. Because if you're talking about the part of theology,
the successor of Muhammad,
successorship, for example, that's where a lot of things differ, and about some companions.
A lot of religious practices in the Shia are very different from the Salafi, the Sunnis.
No, I mean the main ones are not different. Prayer is the same, Hajj is pilgrimage is the same, fasting is the same. So it's
prayer. No, hold on. The Shia pray 5 rakats of prayer in 3 sessions. No, they do.
I'm a Shia.
Are you saying that Shia don't combine prayers?
We do. We combine prayers, but
there are apart from I think one school of Sunni fiqh, the other 3 schools reject that practice. So there is actually a difference.
I mean,
in prayer.
Basically, the morning prayer is by itself. Then you have 2 midday prayers. We combine them. The Sunnis don't.
Yeah.
That's. I mean,
so that is a difference.
It's a minute difference.
No, and when you pray, you use a little stone, right?
Well, it doesn't have to be a stone. It basically has to be something that's directly from the earth.
Right.
Yeah.
But the Sunni don't do that.
Some of them don't.
So your prayers are different as well.
I mean, look, these are minute differences.
And but the thing is, you're telling me that you have managed to maintain, save, and sustain a tradition that goes back to Muhammad, but you can't agree upon what that tradition says.
No, I mean, look.
Now, I'll be willing to concede. I'll be willing to concede that the meta narrative of Islamic prayer has been maintained. But
I mean, some Sunni may raise his hand and pray like this.
Yeah.
We Shia, we don't.
Yes, exactly.
I mean, these are really minute differences.
But the point is, what it demonstrates is that the tradition of the Prophet has not been maintained in its purity.
That's true. That's true.
Are we agreed on that? Right. Now, I mean, then that starts to beg lots of other questions.
I mean, it is preserved, but obviously as a Shia, I would say it's preserved within our lineage.
But it hasn't. But it has suffered corruption amongst the Sunni, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I would say that.
Right. But the Sunni would then say it suffered corruption amongst the Shia. So both sides of this argument are saying that they haven't preserved, the other side, haven't preserved the tradition of the Prophet purely. Right. And then that starts to beg lots of other questions. Right? So it starts to beg the question about how much of the tradition, the Sunnah, you can actually trust.
Yeah, even within a secular framework, they basically mention that those sections where you have overlapping, where it's essentially word for word is the same, the wording of a narration is the same, it's very, very difficult for Sunni scholarship and Shia scholarship to sit together and make this up. So they actually accept those as historical facts. Or in a sense, historically accepted within the Muslim world. So for example, the moon splitting isn't a historical fact to say within the secular world. Within the Islamic framework, that is a fact. The moon did split. So I mean, all Sunnis and Shias agree on that. So then you can sit and say, okay, that is definitely within the Islamic framework.
Yeah, I'm happy to agree that there is a lot of agreement on it.
Yeah.
No, I've got no problem with that. I agree, Sunnis and Shia agree. But for instance, and this cuts right to the heart of Islam, the very reason why the party of Ali separated from, or rather, from your perspective, maintained the expectations of Muhammad versus the Sunni who usurped the expectations of Muhammad.
It wasn't per se the Sunni, it was
Did Abu Bakr, Osman and Uthman usurp the expectation of Muhammad that Ali would be his successor?
Abu Bakr and Umar, but Uthman, he wasn't involved in the usurping, but he basically succumbed to it.
Right.
It made Abu Bakr and Umar.
If you go along with someone's sin, do you share some culpability?
Yes.
Right. So let's go back to Abu Bakr, Uthman and Osman. Did they usurp the will of Muhammad?
Yeah.
Right. So that's really fundamental.
Yeah.
My point is that right at the birth of Islam, we've got clear evidence of corruption about what Islam should be, and it happened right at the start. Remember
at the start of at the death of the Prophet, not the start, because the 23 years there was no issue.
Okay.
I mean, there were hypocrites who would try to.
I mean, when I say start, I was being a bit more generic. You know, it's kind of like within the first generation. But fair enough. You know, right at the very, very start with Muhammad. Okay, fine. But but at the very start of Muhammad, we see evidence of corruption of the religion. And one of the reasons why I reject Islam is because when you look at the hadiths and the hadith science and the many, many developments that occurred after Muhammad's death, including who's going to succeed him and the justifications for that.
The hadith science was a thing that was at the time of the Prophet.
Have you got any evidence for that?
There's a hadith in the Shia hadith corpus, an authentic hadith, where Ali ibn Ibrahim narrates from his father, whose name is Ibrahim ibn Hashim. He narrates from his scholar, whose name is An-Nawfali. An-Nawfali narrates from As-Sakuni. And As-Sakuni narrates from Ja'far al-Sadiq, who is the grandchild of the Prophet. He narrates from his father, who is Muhammad al-Baqir. He narrates from his father, who is Ali Zayn al-Abdi. He narrates from his father, who is Ali al-Hussein, who is the direct grandchild of the
Just taking your word for all of these names,
And then he narrates from his father, Ali ibn Abi Talib, who was raised by the Prophet. He says, إِذَا حَدَّثْتُمْ بِحَدِيثٍ فَأَسْلِدُوهُ, which means that if you were to narrate, a narration include its chain. So this notion of having chain narration is directly from the time of the Prophet.
Right. Is that a hadith used by Sunnis? No. So it's a disputed hadith amongst Muslims.
Within the Shia world, it's authentic.
That's fine, but it's disputed amongst Muslims generally.
I mean, at Sunni wouldn't take that hadith.
Right, and this is the problem. Like, if you look at Christianity, we Christians have total agreement about the 27 books of the New Testament. Every Christian.
What about the Catholic Bible?
Right, that's the point. Muslims repeat that catchphrase without understanding what they're talking about. Those books that are disputed amongst Protestants and Catholics are all Old Testament books. The 27 books of the New Testament are unanimous amongst all Christians. We all use them, right? And the message that they teach is unanimous.
Yeah, and the New
Right?
Testament.
So we Christians have greater unity about our belief in the New Testament than Muslims do about their belief in the Hadith.
Well,
That's just a fact.
The Quran is our main source.
Yeah.
Every Muslim will tell you that. And even within a Salafi understanding, they have they have a lot of pride within the Sahih Bukhari, Sahih Muslim.
Yeah.
They pride themselves a lot in those hadith
Yeah.
sections. So even within a Salafi frame of mind, they'll say the Quran is in a different league.
Yeah.
So the Bible is really comparable to the Quran, but the Quran is something which every Muslim has agreed upon. There's no dispute.
I'm happy to argue. I'm happy to accept that all Muslims believe in the Quran, and I'm happy to accept that there is a text of the Quran that all Muslims. Let's be clear about what I'm trying to say. That there is a text of the Quran that all Muslims agree upon, so long as you're willing to accept that there are textual variants.
Textual variants, no, those textual variants are also from the time of the Prophet. So, for example,
That is the claim.
Malik and Malik, so the king or the owner. is the exact same person.
Did Muhammad ever see the Quran of Duri?
Yeah, I mean, because he was the one who taught it.
No, he didn't. The Duri,
For example,
the Duri text of the Quran came after Muhammad's death.
No, the chain.
Because Duri came after Muhammad's death.
I mean, Al-Sam came after Muhammad as well.
There you go. So he didn't see Asim's text. What about Hafs? Did he see Hafs' text?
Hafs takes his reading. So the chain of Hafs and Al-Sam is read by 95% of Muslims.
Yes, I know.
So Hafs, he takes from Al-Sam.
Yep.
Al-Sam takes from Abi Abdurrahman al-Sulami.
Yeah, you don't need to give me the names. I know you can recite the names. That's fine.
I mean, as a Muslim, I'm very proud of this because no other religion can do this.
But no other. Certainly Christianity didn't need that.
Because
That's something that only Muslims need, and the reason why Muslims need that is because what was the Quran is something that was doubted amongst the first Muslims. I'll give you an example. The verse about stoning adulterers in Sahih al-Bukhari. I know you reject that hadith. Am I right in your understanding you reject that hadith? So the verse about stoning the adulterer is in the hadiths, and they said that they understood it as being part of the Quran, and it's not in our Quran today. So that's in the time of Uthman. That's in the time of Uthman. Talking.
I would use a better example if you want to. Now I'm going to give you ammunition because this example is really because in Islam we have a principle called the nasikh wal mansukh, which means the abrogated verses. Sometimes the ruling of a verse is abrogated, and sometimes the reading of the verse is abrogated.
Yes.
So the verse you're talking about is a sheikh or sheikha إذا زنيا فرجموهما البتة, which means that if the old or the old male and the old female are to commit adultery, stone them both.
Yeah.
For they have committed a grave sin or whatever.
Yeah.
This verse, its recitation was abrogated, but its ruling remained.
Yeah, and that's a problem. So what's the point? I mean, it's just another problem. What is the point in abrogating something that you're going to maintain? Why not just maintain the words that justify it?
Well, I mean, we have a certain...
Isn't that just an authoring confusion?
By the way, that explanation that I gave is the Sunni narrative.
I know. Yeah. It's just an author of confusion.
I mean, that's basically how they explain it. In my personal view, there was never. I mean, that verse never existed. So,
I know, yeah. And that goes back to the other problem about the fact that Muslims can't agree what is hadith to trust and what isn't hadith to trust. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I hope you can see why I don't find dawah convincing. I don't find the call to accept Islam very convincing, and I think there's very good reasons why you should reject Islam and become a Christian. Now, I want to ask you, what's your name, bro? Mustafa. You've been a very pleasant man. I don't get many opportunities to talk to Shia, so I always enjoy it when I do. And Shia seem to come at these conversations with a different kind of energy than these Salafi nutcases. You know.
He's from Kuwait. He's a Salafi.
Yeah.
We're in good,
So my point to you is, like, do you have a Bible, Ro?
Yeah, I've got the New International Version and I've got King James Version.
Great. I want to encourage you to read them and like come back with your questions. And you know, next time, because today we talked about Islam a lot and the problems I have with Islam. So come back another time and let's make it fair and you talk about what you think are the problems inside Christianity. Is that fair? It's a fair invitation. And I'd encourage you to read it and to consider, you know, what you've heard today, because I think what you've heard today are good reasons to essentially reject, essentially reject Islam, to be fair. I'd like to give you a book, and this is just a small gift to show that I appreciate the way that we've had this dialogue. Bear with me 1 second.
And we have the opportunity to get into that eternity. Not in a concept.
There you go.
You don't know. In the spirit. You don't know.
So it's just explaining our faith aimed at Muslims, dealing with some of the questions that Muslims often raise.
Nice booklet.
Yeah. Anyway, Mustafa, lovely to speak to you. Thank you for being such a wonderful, kind person. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we'll talk again. God bless you. Take care. Right.